Hi, I want to continue on the previous video on glove etiquette because I've talked about a lot of different etiquette, especially when it comes to summer gloves, but I do want to make a difference because it just occurred to me that everything I've talked about are short summer gloves. You do have opera gloves which goes all the way to your elbows, over your elbows, and those have a slightly different etiquette. So I want to take this video to just explain really quickly about the difference between these kind of wrist gloves, much shorter, and then the long opera gloves, and they have very different kind of etiquette references. So to get started, opera gloves, which I actually don't have, are the super long ones. They're usually for evening, formal events, balls, opera, and in a much grander setting. All that being said, I will talk about theatre etiquette next. So opera gloves are the long ones and they're really elegant, they're a bit more formal. There are some black tie events in very specific social circles where they mandate opera gloves, but usually we don't really see them often in a day-to-day life. On the other hand, wrist and summer gloves, so the one that ends at your wrist, much shorter, these are more of daytime activities, garden parties, even churches if you go to church. So they're really short. How is it worn? For opera gloves, it's worn over your elbow and you have sleeveless gowns. So of course you don't wear long sleeve gowns and then you put gloves over. That's a bit bizarre. And so yes, you have sleeveless gowns, maybe to your shoulders, and then you have your gloves over your elbow. Summer gloves, on the other hand, they're at your wrist, so you can wear short sleeves, you can wear long sleeves. I mix them up occasionally. So if I was taking the plane the other day and I decided to wear gloves with a watch over my gloves, and I was wearing long sleeves because I was on a flight. So that's how I paired it. And then when I went to ballet 2 days ago, it was a A-line dress, sleeveless, just over my shoulders, and I wore gloves. So it's really versatile, it really depends. It's a lot more casual. When it comes to food and drinks, whatever this rule stays, whether you're wearing short gloves or you're wearing opera gloves, you always remove them when you're eating or drinking. This is really confusing to me because I know when you're sitting down, when you're seated and you're enjoying several courses of a proper meal, you definitely remove your gloves. However, I wonder in these kind of casual settings where you are just drinking with champagne glasses, small little ones, like in a drawing room before going to the dining room, I've seen some occasions where people continue wearing the opera gloves. Don't know what the etiquette is there, but I know in general when you eat or drink, when you're touching something that deals with food, you always remove your gloves. I can imagine just perhaps, because when you're wearing opera gloves, they're very, very long. They're very difficult to put on and take off. So I imagine you don't want to put them on and take them off every time. It might be a bit annoying. Of course, when it's short sleeves, you always 100% remove them when you're eating or drinking. Just to be safe, as long as you're wearing gloves, anytime you're eating or drinking, you should always remove them. I talked about greeting and handshake before as well. With the opera gloves, you always have them on, and whether you're greeting a male or female, you always have them on. At least I'm talking from a female perspective. You always have them on and you shake your hands. Actually, opera gloves only for females. So you greet them with your gloves on. Unless you're meeting like the queen or king, royalty. Don't know how often people meet the royalty, but if you meet the royalty, remove your gloves. On the casual ones, as I mentioned, when you're female and you're meeting a male, you keep them on. And when you're female meeting another female, you take them off. It's an etiquette thing. Jewelry. Okay, so jewelry is something that I want to talk a little bit more about because I think it's something that it's a bit ignored. When it comes to long gloves, okay, so for a start, rings, you always have them under your gloves. You never, ever, ever wear rings over your gloves. It's just, you just don't do that, okay? It's very rude to do that. So you always wear them below. And when it comes to bracelets and watches, so you wear watches, you wear your bracelets over your opera gloves. Your short one though, because they're very short, you know, they're the wrist length. Even if my daily stack ends around my wrist, it doesn't make sense that I put them over, and because they're so they move so much that there's no point wanting to have my bracelets or my watches over. So I've tried, because I do have another set of gloves that's slightly longer, just slightly longer than my wrist. I tried to put my watch on it. It's a bit awkward because it's just not the right length. Maybe if you're very close to your elbow, it's not to the degree of opera gloves, but closer to your elbow, you can definitely have your bracelets and watches over. But if it's just around your wrist area, it's just a bit strange because your gloves are moving quite a bit. Your watch, you don't have it super tight, your bracelets are not super tight to your skin, so they move a little bit, and so they will come off. And so if your gloves are more than halfway through your arms, you put your bracelets and watches over. But if it's less, then you just keep it inside your gloves. Easy to understand. Lastly, when it comes to fabric, so for opera gloves, it's usually silk or leather, and maybe satin if that's something that you like. With the summer gloves though, it's cotton, light silk, lacy silk, very lightweight leather. So as I mentioned, I told you this is silk on the lacy part. It's just very fine silk, and the front is 90% cotton and 10% polyester, which is perfect for summertime because it's very, very light, and it's just perfect for going to any summer type of events. So the main difference is that opera gloves are more formal statement kind of evening activity accessory, whereas summer gloves are a bit more light, practical, casual. You remove them more frequently. I also want to conclude with one point that I talked about but not full enough, which is clapping. So I mentioned when you're going to a theater, going to opera, going to ballet, you remove your gloves when you clap, because it's just strange to have muffled sound when you clap. However, that is for short sleeve gloves. For long opera gloves, you don't remove them to clap. It's a bit of an awkward situation because it's very long and it's very difficult to remove, very difficult to put it back, so you can just clap your hands with gloves on for opera gloves. For summer gloves, yes, you remove them to clap. I know it's a bit strange, especially when you're watching ballet. You have all these different scenes and different acts. You're just clapping your hands a lot, and yeah, what I did was at one point I was removing and putting it on, removing and putting it on every time I clap my hands. But I know that there's certain scenes that I really appreciate the efforts, and I just remove them during those scenes or those acts, just to be prepared to clap my hands to thank the performers. So etiquette is a very practical, almost like a common sense thing, I think. Maybe it takes some time to just remind certain people on what that looks like, or what are some things that are a little less common to certain people. Once you understand that, once you get into the groove, you realize that etiquette is just really common sense. So hopefully that helps to address and clarify the previous video. Till then, I'll see you next time. Bye.